Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. I'm your host, Joe Hamilton, along with Scott Tobin. Scott, how are you doing, man? It was a beautiful day out there.
It was, dude. It was a really nice day. I feel like I've spent too much of my day talking to you. No, just kidding. For anybody that doesn't know, we did our podcast earlier today, so you can go to our Crunch Time page and see that. But yeah, no, it was a beautiful day today. Spring is close to being here for real. You know, we got a little cold snap coming up at the end of the week, but after that, it's going to be a beautiful Easter weekend and baseball's starting, and I'm in a really good mood, man.
I'm in a really good mood also. I mean, this is the time where we all start to watch prediction videos or prediction shows on, Fox Sports 1, MLB Network. I'll be surely to keep an eye on those, but we're not going to talk about baseball just yet.
Wait. Stop. Don't tell people to go to Fox Sports. People need to go to Crunch Time and watch our predictions. They don't need to go to Fox
course.
Sports
Well,
West
we did our predictions
Network.
earlier. Yeah. We did our predictions earlier today. Don't worry if you missed that. We are going to go through the Eastern Division on both leagues tonight, so be on the lookout for that. But we're not going to get there right away, though. So there are two games tonight. One that was already played between Oregon State and Houston. Houston wins this game 67-61. Oregon State is a team that, they got down big early, Scott, and they made this a game. Talk about this game real quick.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give Oregon State a lot of credit. Do you realize that Oregon State's only the second 12 seed to ever make it to the Elite Eight in the NCAA tournament? Only the second 12 seed to ever play in the Elite Eight. And the other one, Joe, the only other 12 seed to ever play in the Elite Eight were the 2002 Missouri Tigers.
Who was on that team?
Kim English, Ricky Paulding. There's a bunch of other guys, and I can't remember. Their names aren't coming to the top of my mind right now. I can see them, but I can't think of their names. But yeah, it was a really talented team. Quinn Snyder was coaching that team.
When you have a Hall of Fame coach like Quinn Snyder coaching you, you're going to go far, especially when you have talent. Kim English had some talent, man. So but talk about this game in general, Scott. Did you see what I saw? I talked to you before the show, and I said even 20-foot jump shots weren't going in for this for Houston at times, even for Oregon State. What is it about shooting, man, that's so hard for some of these teams?
I mean, you have off nights. Everybody does. You got to remember they're college kids playing in the biggest game of their lives, so there's nerves and everything else involved in that. But, like I said, you got to give Oregon State a ton of credit. They weren't supposed to be here. They pulled a bunch of upsets to get to this point. And, Houston was a solid team. That's the only one of these matchups the next 2 days that I didn't have a team still alive. It should have been Illinois. Illinois, unfortunately, got knocked out 2 rounds ago, but it should have been an Illinois-Houston matchup in that game. But I still have a chance to have 3 of my 4 Final Four teams make it because I've got Arkansas, Gonzaga, and Michigan, so I could get 3 out of my 4 into the Final Four, which wouldn't be too bad.
Wouldn't be too bad. I mean, mine's already shot. Like I told you, 3 of my Final 4 were the Big Ten. So, yeah, that didn't work out too well. I mean, you still have Michigan out of the Big Ten yet to play, but it'll be a tough matchup for whoever Houston has to face. Yes, they're a 2 seed, but isn't it the winner of the game tonight, Scott?
Yeah.
Faces them. Okay.
They will play the winner of this game, and then Gonzaga or whoever wins tomorrow night out of Gonzaga and USC and UCLA Michigan will play each other.
We'll get to those matchups because that Michigan game is going to be fun to watch. But Arkansas and Baylor, how do you dissect this matchup?
It's going to be a really good game. Like I said, I have Arkansas in the Final Four, so them pulling for the Razorbacks. But Baylor's a good ball club. They've been one of the top teams in the country this year, and Arkansas was kind of a sneaky team. They are a 3 seed. Baylor's the 1 seed. So Baylor's the favorite by a little bit, but it should be a really competitive game, and hopefully it comes down to the wire.
Yeah, hopefully it comes down to the wire. I like when basketball games come down to the wire, and I don't like the basketball games where like the last minute takes about 30 minutes, because usually when that happens, it tends to be a blowout, or at least not a blowout, I should say, Scott. But at what point do teams start fouling? How far do they have to be down?
It just depends. It just depends on how far down you are and what you think the other team's free throw shooting ability is. We kind of saw that in the Alabama game last night. There were a ton of fouls, and they kept going to the free throw line, and Bama couldn't hit their free throws. They were 11 of 25 from the free throw line, and UCLA was able to pull away in overtime. It shouldn't have gotten that close. I mean, Bama should have been up if they would have hit their free throws, and then UCLA had a 3-point lead, and Bama hits a three at the buzzer to send the game to overtime, and then UCLA blew them away 21-9 in overtime. But when you're a good basketball club and you can't shoot free throws, then that's a big problem, and that's a problem in college basketball and even high school basketball. I see it where teams just don't practice free throw shooting enough because everybody wants to hit the three or they want the dunk, because that's what gets them the highlights, and they don't concentrate on the free throws, which a lot of times, a lot of games come down to free throw shooting, and kids just don't focus on that a lot.
It's not just that, Scott. The thing I've been seeing are the 20-foot shots, the massive amount of three-pointers being thrown up. It's if you can't make the enclosed shots, the 20-footers, 30-footers, then you're not going to make a three-pointer. Am I wrong on that?
You are, because there's some kids that can't hit. As weird as that sounds, there are kids that can hit a three-pointer, but they can't hit a mid-range jump shot, again, because the three-pointer is the sexy play in basketball. So everybody's wanting to shoot a three, or like I said, they're wanting the dunk or the layup, and they're not practicing those mid-range jumpers either. So there's a lot of kids that can hit a three-pointer that can't hit a 15-foot little fadeaway jump shot.
That's the weird part of basketball, man. It's what was better out of the two for you, Scott? I know you played basketball. You had to.
I did play basketball. I played point guard. I could shoot threes. I love to shoot threes. But I was better defensively and just assists. I didn't shoot a whole lot. I love to get other guys involved, man.
That's awesome. So you always want to be the best team player you can, and I don't think some of these kids are being taught right. That's for sure. Number 6, USC, and number 1, Gonzaga. How good of a game can this be? Because Gonzaga is a number 1, and they are pretty far in this tournament. There are 2 number 1s remaining, the other one in the other game. What do you think? Well, 3. Well, 2 playing tomorrow. That's on me. But 2 playing tomorrow. USC, Gonzaga, how do you see that game playing out?
I think it's going to be a better game than a lot of people think. USC's played really good in this tournament. Nobody was talking about the Pac-12. We talked about the Big Ten. We talked about the SEC. But nobody was talking about the Pac-12. They were supposed to be a weak division. And look what's happened in this tournament. This week, as we're talking about these days, you had Oregon State, you have USC, you had UCLA. Oregon just got knocked out yesterday. They had 4 teams in the Sweet 16 out of the Pac-12, a conference that nobody gave any credit to this year. So it just goes to show, and a lot of that has to do with being on the West Coast, and games are played later, and people on the East Coast don't see some of those later games on the West Coast. But the Pac-12 has been a lot better than anybody gave them credit for. And I think USC will give Gonzaga a game, at least for a while. But, Gonzaga is the best team in the country. They're undefeated for a reason. So I would expect Gonzaga to win that game and go on to the Final Four.
They would face whoever wins this next game, and that's UCLA and Michigan. That would be a fun matchup, USC and UCLA. I mean, that's not highly unlikely, but they are the lower seeds in each matchup. UCLA is a number 11 seed and Michigan number 1 seed. I say that, Scott. I said my earlier statement, but how much pressure do you think there is on these number 1 seeds?
Oh, there's some definitely. Although, I mean, it's a great year because you've gotten this far, but there's still some pressure. And UCLA is playing really good basketball. They definitely weren't supposed to be here. They were one of the first four in. They had to play that play-in game against Michigan State. They got down huge in that game and had a massive comeback in the second half, and they've just rolled with that through the tournament. You got to give those kids a lot of credit because they've really kind of outplayed their abilities in some sense. But Michigan's a really good team, coached by a legend at Michigan and Juwan Howard, part of the Fab Five. You're not old enough to remember the Fab Five, Joe, but that was a pretty impressive group of kids that went through Michigan in the early to mid '90s. Chris Webber, Jalen Rose, Juwan Howard, Jimmy King, Ray Fisher. They were pretty good and kind of changed basketball in a lot of ways. But Juwan was part of that, and then had a legendary career in the NBA, and is now back coaching Michigan. And
go ahead.
So I think the Wolverines will win that. I think UCLA will give them a game, but I think Michigan goes on.
You think Michigan goes on? It's going to be fun, that's for sure. Is there any update? Well, that game's just started. Baylor and that Baylor game's just started.
It's 9-2 Baylor. Baylor got off to a 7-0 start. It's 9-2 right now.
Yeah, that's. I thought this would be a pretty good game. I'm not saying it's not, but 9-2 run to start the game. That's a little. I don't know. Little inauspicious start for Arkansas, that's for sure. This could be a blowout early, right?
I don't think so. I think it'll be a game of runs. I expect Arkansas to come back. I don't see this game being a blowout. I could be wrong, but I don't see it.
I certainly hope not, because true sports fans don't really want to see blowouts, that's for sure. Scott, what do you think of the tournament to this point? Knowing it was all going to be in Indiana, how has this tournament been run in your eyes?
They've done a great job. You look at everything; they haven't had any issues really. For the most part, everything's gone pretty smooth. Other than the one early COVID outbreak we had with the one team in the first round, but other than that, we haven't had any issues really. Everything's gone smooth. And it's been a fun tournament. There have been a ton of upsets, more than in a normal year for sure. And it was just a kind of a different tournament because you didn't have the powers. There was no Duke. There was no Kentucky. Kansas got knocked out early. North Carolina got knocked out early. So it's been a different tournament. There's some teams you don't normally see make runs. And so it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it.
I've really enjoyed it too, and it's a nice change because, usually you see those powerhouses, and it's nice to not know who's going to be in the Elite Eight or Sweet 16 Elite Eight, though, at this point. So I like a little unpredictability. So, Scott, before we go to break, tell us what we're in for in our next segment.
The next segment, we're going to start talking a little baseball. I think we're going to talk about the Cardinals first. They announced their 25-man roster, so we'll kind of break that down a little bit and give our thoughts. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after this break on Crunch Time.
Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Joe Hamilton alongside Scott Tobin. The Cardinals announced their schedule, or not schedule. They announced their roster, and there were some surprises. There weren't as many as I would have liked. Matt Carpenter still on his team, for example. But that's neither here or there. Talk about this roster, Scott, because there's some issues.
I don't really have a problem with the roster, to be totally honest with you. I mean, I know a lot of people are disappointed that Matt Carpenter is on the roster. Matt Carpenter, like we've said a million times, was going to be on this roster no matter what. And he's going to play for a while. I mean, he's not going to play a whole lot, but they're going to give him chances. He's going to play some second base. He's going to get pinch hit opportunities early to see what they have there, and they have to do that because, they have to find out what Matt Carpenter is, if he's somebody that they can use and come through in a pinch later on in the season, or if they have to address that at the trade deadline. So they've got to figure out what they've got in Matt Carpenter. The outfield, there's a little bit of a question because of the fact that Harrison Bader is going to miss the first month of the season, basically. That was the biggest shocker to me, is that I really thought Lane Thomas was going to be on this team. And when that roster came out yesterday and Lane Thomas is on the caravan, the back and forth travel squad, I was really shocked to see that, and that Justin Williams is the starting right fielder. Were you surprised by that?
I am surprised by that because I don't think Justin Williams really showed enough to be the everyday right fielder for the St. Louis Cardinals at this point. Granted, I mean, we don't know how long he'll be up here, but you have Dylan Carlson in center field, and he's your normal right fielder. I mean, they say he was going to take over center field anyway at some point, but I think this is a little too early for the Cardinals' liking. But there could have been another way for the Cardinals to address right field. I mean, there could have been a move maybe, but I just don't think Justin Williams is it right now. I know, Scott.
What move are you going to make right now? Who are you going to get right now?
I know, but the Cardinals were really stuck between a rock and a hard place. And
how do you know Justin Williams doesn't come up and tear it up?
Well, here's the thing, Scott. He better come up and tear it up with his bat because he doesn't have speed, shockingly. And he's not that great. He's not that great defensively. Have you seen him defensively? Go ahead.
Actually, he does have speed. He's like the fourth fastest guy on the team. He's not very far behind Bader and Edman and O'Neill. So, yeah, he does have speed.
He does. Okay. What about his defense, Scott? We've seen his defense be a little suspect for a guy, like you said, if he has speed, you think he can get to a ball. Well, there were some instances in spring training. Granted, again, one, it was spring training. Two, the wind at Roger Dean Stadium can play tricks on players. But will he be fine in the Busch Stadium outfield?
I think he will be. And you talk about that. Apparently, that's the reason Lane Thomas didn't make this team, because his defense was awful this spring. So, and I heard that from more than a couple of people today, that Lane Thomas disappointed them with his defense. One of the biggest reasons he didn't make this opening day roster. So, yeah, I mean, Justin Williams is going to give a shot. I've said this more than a couple of times. Tommy Edman's going to be in the outfield more than anybody wants him to be, or more than fans want him to be. They've already said that he's the backup center fielder when Dylan Carlson gets a day off. Why it's not Tyler O'Neill, I'm not really sure. But Tommy Edman's going to be the backup center fielder, which means more than likely on those days, Matt Carpenter will be at second base, or if they decide to stick him in right field, Matt Carpenter will be at second base. As far as Justin Williams goes, again, they're going to give him a shot for the first week or two, see what he does. If he struggles at all, I think Lane Thomas will be up here. And again, we're talking about a month basically until you get Harrison Bader back. So now, you can get through it.
You can, but Scott, this comment is exactly what you just said. That's why I put it up right in the middle of your sentence there. I don't believe the Cardinals will wait real long on Williams. If he doesn't produce, Thomas will take his place, which you basically just said that. So the other question I have with this roster is the back end of the rotation. I'm talking after Wainwright even. I mean, I still have questions about what Carlos Martinez can bring this team, what John Gant is. I mean, he's only really been a 5-inning pitcher when he has started. And then what Daniel Ponce de Leon can do, because he can be erratic at times. He had a few outings this spring that weren't that great. And when he was in the rotation, Scott, he didn't really give me any confidence to put in him. You know what I mean? So I don't know if I like the back end of that rotation.
Well, I mean, it's not like we're talking about that being the back end of the rotation all season. When John Gant's had a chance in the past to be in the starting rotation, he's been really good. You look at his numbers last year when he made starts, and 2 years ago when he made a ton of starts, he was actually really, really good in the rotation. So I'm not really worried about John Gant. Again, we're not talking about John Gant being in the rotation all year, probably. But I think for 4 or 5 starts, which is all hopefully it'll be, I think he'll be fine. The same thing with Ponce. I mean, you got to remember, they're talking like, and I don't have a whole lot of confidence in KK like some people do, but they're talking like KK is only going to miss 2 starts, and you have 4 days off in April, so you can work that rotation around where those guys may only start 1 or 2 times. So people are all worried about that. I wouldn't be all that worried about the back end of the rotation early in the season. And think about this, Joe. We broke down all of baseball today. How many teams, when we talked about them, after their second or third pitcher, did we say, man, there's nobody really good in this rotation? Pretty much, other than about 3 teams, just about every single one of them, right?
Yeah. The only one that I can say, is not dominant from top to bottom, but pretty damn close, and that's the Los Angeles Dodgers. And maybe the San Diego Padres, but I get your point.
Yeah, the Dodgers, the Padres, maybe the Mets. But again, there's a lot of questions with all 3 of those teams, with health. Like we talked about, we don't know what half of that Padres rotation is going to do. We don't know what Snell will do. We don't know what Lamet's going to, if he's going to be healthy. We don't know what Darvish they're going to get. And the same thing, we can say the same thing about the Mets or, pretty much the Dodgers for that matter with Kershaw. His back can pop up and he can miss time. David Price didn't pitch at all last year. So how has David Price bounced back? Like you said, Trevor Bauer is kind of inconsistent from year to year. So, I mean, there are questions with all of these rotations, and you'll just get through it. And the Cardinals will have other options. Jake Woodford made this team because, if they need somebody to jump in right away, he can be there. You've got Oviedo in the minors getting ready. And, who knows? Maybe if you have to, in a pinch, Matthew Liberatore. And like I said, when we talked about the Cardinals earlier, I think they will make a trade to strengthen this rotation at the trade deadline. Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Scott, how you mention all these guys, you fail to mention the X factor in my mind to this pitching staff, and that's Alex Reyes. Why?
Because he's not going to be in the rotation. The Cardinals have told us he's not going to be in the rotation.
But Scott, to get 100 starts, I'm not saying start all the time, but if you want to get him to 100 innings, you're going to have to give him a few starts.
I mean, he might get 3 or 4, but yeah. I don't see him getting more than that. You
didn't even list him as an option.
Well, I don't consider 4 starts as an option, honestly. I mean, Reyes, I don't think of him as a rotation. He's going to be a back-end guy, especially, now you hear him talking about him potentially being part of the closing squad. If he's part of the closing squad, he's not going to be in that rotation.
Yeah, okay. I'm not disagreeing with you. I just, if they're wanting to get him to 100 innings, then they're going to have to pitch him almost every day. You know what I mean? It's like,
and that's not going to happen. 100 innings was what they were talking about. If they get him to 70 or 80, that'll be that. I would imagine that'll be about the max. And again, it's going to depend because if he ends up being the closer, then it's not even going to be that. Then he may not be in the rotation next year. He may be your closer if he's the best option.
If that happens, Scott, would that be? I wouldn't say a failure by any means, but would that be kind of low, like not living up to expectations? Because if you remember, Scott, when Alex Reyes was coming up, when he was a prospect, he was talked about as this big time starter. If he ends up just being a closer for you his entire career, what does that mean?
Well, what happens if he's a closer for the rest of his career? He closes for the next 10 years, and he has 400 saves, and his ERA is 2 point something, and he's a Hall of Famer. I mean, he could be the most dominant closer in baseball. So then, no, he's not a failure because he became the most dominant closer in baseball.
When I said I wouldn't call it a failure, but how do you scout this guy as a starter and then him end up being a closer? Does that kind of look bad on you as an organization?
Well, no, because nobody saw all those injuries coming. That couldn't be helped. Nobody could see that coming. You got to remember that the guy's missed almost 3 years. So nobody could foresee that. But again, if he becomes a closer and he's saving 45 games, is saving 45 games a year more valuable than winning 15 as a starter?
You got a point there. I wonder what the Cardinals are going to do at closer anyway. You have Jordan Hicks still, and I know he won't be closing right away, okay, but he does throw 100. You have Genesis Cabrera, who at times, when he's right, can be dominant. Junior Fernandez, I don't think is going to start on this team.
Right. Don't forget about Ryan Helsley.
Right. Exactly. So you talk about a closing team, right? Like a team of guys that can close you games. That's like 3 or 4 guys right there. We just going to name it closer by committee and make like a closer rotation?
Why not? Use whoever you think you need to use at a certain point. If you've got, then you don't have to worry about it. If you're in a big jam in the 7th inning and you think, okay, who's the best guy to get me out of this? Okay, it's Alex Reyes. Well, who am I going to have close if I use Reyes here? I'll use Hicks or vice versa. Or, you can fall back to Ryan Helsley, or you have Andrew Miller, or you have Cabrera, or they've got all these options where you can mix and match depending on how the game's going, how you want to do it.
I mean, it's a good problem to have, Scott. That's for sure. Now, how much of the lion's share you think at this point Yadier? Oh, this is something I didn't think about. You also have Giovanni Gallegos. Didn't even think about him. So
I was gonna mention him when we started, and then we started talking about the guys that threw 100, and I didn't get back to Gallegos. But he's going to be a big part of it as well.
Yeah. So let's go to the catcher position real quick, because how much does Yadi play? Because look at how much Yadi played during spring training. That's a problem to me. The fact that he started almost every game in spring training, that's a problem. And then he's going to catch 100 and let's say he catches 120 games. You're not going to see a good Yadier Molina by August, September if that's the case. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah. When has that ever been a problem where Yadi's bad at the end of the year because he caught all season? When has that ever been a problem?
His hitting would suffer, and it doesn't look like his arm is going anywhere, Scott. Last year I talked about his arm going. God, I ate crow on that one too, because Yadi's arm is unbelievable. Even at 39 years old, almost 40 years old, this guy can sling it with the best of them.
I don't know. As many as he can. If Yadi can play 130 games, let him play 130 games, because like you said, he's still the best. He's still the best weapon behind the plate that you have. And his offense has never suffered because he's played a lot. There's never been an example of that, because just look what he's done in the postseason and down the stretch, all the big hits that Yadier Molina's had throughout his career, down the stretch and in the playoffs. So if he's healthy and can play, let him play. Yeah, I know you want to see Andrew Knizner, and I do too. But Knizner's going to get a chance to play, because Yadi's not going to play every inning of those games. And Yadi's going to be smart. He's even said he knows that he has to back off a little bit in the regular season. And it's not like he played every inning in spring training, because he only played 9 innings twice. So Knizner did get plenty of time behind the plate in the spring. And I think Knizner is going to be a good backup and maybe a good starting catcher at some point. But again, when you have Yadi, and Yadi is still Yadi, let him play as long as he can, man, because you're never going to see this again in our lifetime.
Do you think Knizner stays on his team past this year?
That's a tough question to answer. I think he'll be on the team next year, because I don't think Herrera will be ready yet. Again, the kid's 18, 19. He's still really young, so I don't. He won't be
ready for 2 years, right?
It's hard to say. I wouldn't rush him. So I would imagine that Kisner's here or they bring somebody else in. The only way Kisner's gone is if he's a part of a huge trade package that makes your team better because you've moved him. But if they do, then they would probably have to bring in another backup until Herrera's ready. But, Yadi, I don't think this is Yadi's last year either. I would imagine that Yadi will be right back here next year watching Yadi play one more year.
I'll hope you're right, Scott. Well, coming up here on Crunch Time, we got a Eastern Division preview on both the NL and AL sides. Stick with us right here on Crunch Time.
Hey Crunch Time fans, my name is Graham Forsyth. I'm the host of Coffee with Graham and the Prospect Show on ASTV Productions. On Coffee with Graham, I talk to athletes, coaches, and whoever else involved in the amateur sports scene in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And on the Prospect Show, I talk to the best young hockey prospects from around North America. You can catch all the coverage on ASTV Productions. You can catch Coffee with Graham on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. And for the Prospect Show, that show airs every Friday at 8 p.m. Central Time. Hope to see you there. Have a good one.
Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Now we get into our prediction series, and this is going to be fun, man. That's for sure. We're going to start with the Eastern Divisions first. Scott, I'll let you pick. What do you want to start with?
Let's do the National League first.
Let's do the National League first. And this is a very, very intriguing division. These are four teams or five teams that can make runs, and I'm excited. There is no real bad team in this division, at least on paper. I mean, you got the Marlins who made the playoffs last year, Washington, Atlanta, New York, and Philadelphia. And let's start. I know we started differently today, but let's start with the Washington Nationals. You have you have some aging aces on your pitching staff, and you have an aging face of the franchise in Ryan Zimmerman, but they also have a lot of young pieces. They have some power in this lineup, Scott. So let's talk about Washington.
Is Ryan Zimmerman still the face of that franchise, though, or is Juan Soto taking that over?
Until Ryan Zimmerman retires, it's still Ryan Zimmerman, in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely been there the longest, and he's been a star there. But, a lot of people would go with Soto. I understand the Zimmerman thing, though, because Ryan Zimmerman has been a very good player for a long time. We talked about this team earlier today. Their lineup's going to be interesting. They went out and kind of overhauled their lineup. They brought in Josh Bell and Kyle Schwarber to kind of strengthen the middle of that lineup to go along with Soto. Those guys are going to have to revert to form of a couple of years ago when they were in Chicago and Pittsburgh individually to make this offense go. If they don't, they're really going to struggle, because otherwise then you're putting everything on Soto and a guy like Trey Turner and, a young kid like Carter Kieboom. So those guys really need to go to make it work. And then, like you said, their rotation, full of names, and everybody knows them: Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, Patrick Corbin, John Lester. They are starting to get older. They've all had health issues over the last couple of years. But, if everything goes well, if they're healthy, that rotation's tough, and that lineup could be good. What do you think of the Nationals?
That lineup has a chance to be scary. We talked before last season, Scott, about the Nationals' lack of protection for Juan Soto. I think they pretty much answered the bell, and no pun intended, by getting Josh Bell from the Pittsburgh Pirates, and you go out and get Kyle Schwarber from the Chicago Cubs. And I think Schwarber's going to have a good season there. I think Josh Bell, from everything we've seen this spring, Josh Bell has been as advertised, at least the 2019 version of Josh Bell. The 2020 version couldn't really get off of his feet. And 2019, he was an all-star. He's taking the ball to all fields, which he was doing so far in spring training. So if he can continue what he's been doing in spring training, I like Josh Bell in that lineup. Also, with Kyle Schwarber, I love that. You still have Trey Turner. That's another name you didn't bring up, Scott.
Yeah, Turner's definitely a guy that they need more out of. He kind of he wasn't real great last year, so they need him to kind of go back to where he was 2 years ago. And then, like we said, we need the kid. They need the kid Carter Kieboom to really show something this year as well.
Yeah, they do. So let's move on to the New York Mets. The New York Mets are an intriguing team to me. New owner, knew you were going to go out and spend money if you were Steve Cohen, and you go out and make a splash getting Francisco Lindor. The Mets, to me, they have good pitching, good hitting, but there was a time after the World Series run, this was after the World Series run, that we thought they'd be good for a little bit of time, and they weren't. They just couldn't score runs, Scott, and the same lineups have always been there. What do you think about the New York Mets? Can they get off the schneid? Can they score more runs? Can they score with 2 outs? That's been a big bugaboo for the New York Mets.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. Francisco Lindor being there gives them a superstar in New York that they haven't really had since David Wright in a lot of ways. I mean, he's the biggest superstar since David Wright, and they hope that they can keep him for a while. You know, they need guys like Michael Conforto and Pete Alonso to have good years, J.D. Davis. They brought in James McCann from the White Sox to fill that catching void. Hope he can hit. And then, like you said, that rotation, you know, you've got Jacob deGrom, you've got Marcus Stroman, Carlos Carrasco they got in the Lindor trade. He's going to miss a couple of starts, but he should be ready by mid-April. He's going to be really good. And then they're going to get Noah Syndergaard back at some point, probably the end of May, first part of June. So this Mets rotation has the possibilities of being really nasty. If those guys in the lineup can step up, this team could be really, really scary in this division and in the National League in general.
Yeah, it really could be. It could rival those other pitching staffs we talked about, like the Dodgers. And, you know, there are 2, 3 even good rotations in this division. I mean, the Atlanta Braves were a couple games away from going to the World Series last year. There are no slouches either. They have Freddie Freeman, Ronald Acuna Jr., Ozzie Albies. You know, they just have a good team all around. And I remember talking last year when the Atlanta Braves kind of DFA'd Mike Foltynewicz. I go, this is not good for Atlanta. And we were questioning their pitching. Now, I mean, I don't think I can question Ian Anderson anymore. I don't think I can question Mike Soroka. So if those other guys can live up to their potentials, this could be a good Braves rotation. Their offense is scary. Do you like the Atlanta Braves?
I do. Them getting Marcell Ozuna back was big. You know, that was going to be a pretty big hole if Ozuna didn't come back. So him going back in the middle of that lineup really fills them out. And then if Travis d'Arnaud can do what he did last year, especially down the stretch and in the postseason, that's huge from them in the catching spot. And then their rotation, like you said, Soroka and Ian Anderson have looked good. Max Fried should be the ace of that staff. And then they brought in Charlie Morton. So if the young pitchers, Soroka, Fried, and Anderson, don't take a step back, which a lot of times you see young pitchers burst on the scene, and then the next year they kind of take a step back before they really excel again and really hit their stride. So that would be my question there. And then their fifth starter is Drew Smiley, who's a guy who's been around for a long time. He's a veteran. You know, he's a good fifth starter. You know, he's a guy that's going to give you innings and give you probably 10 or 11 wins. So they have a potential to be really good, but, you know, there is just that little bit of concern because you see that happen with young pitchers a lot of times. You know, they have that initial success, and then they take that little step back before they really get going. So it'll be interesting to see how that staff does. And I'm a little bit worried about the back end of their bullpen. I'm not sure that bullpen is as strong as some of these other teams.
Another team that looks to rebound is the Philadelphia Phillies. This is a very, very scary lineup if it all produces. You have Rhys Hoskins, Bryce Harper, Odubel Herrera. I mean, names all up and down this lineup. But their biggest bugaboo has been their bullpen, Scott. I mean, when you have to throw Hector Neris out there every night, not saying he's a terrible pitcher by any means. He's not a bad pitcher. Just when you have to go to him only, when you only have him to go to, really, you're in for some trouble. So It's good to see that they finally have something to fall back on that's not just Hector Neris. But what do you think about the Philadelphia Phillies?
Like you said, that lineup has got a lot of names, starting with Andrew McCutchen, but he's been banged up. If McCutchen can stay healthy, if Rhys Hoskins has a good year, they've got Gene Segura and Didi Gregorius kind of in the lower half of that lineup, which is a pretty good group with Herrera at the end. They can produce pretty well. It can't all just be Bryce Harper and JT Realmuto. Those other guys have to step up. And then the same thing with their rotation. You've got the two big guys at the top in Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, but then can Matt Moore and Chase Anderson and Zach Elfin, can those guys hold their own at the back end of that rotation? So I agree with you. I think the biggest question is going to be Phillies pitching. But again, they're another team that if everything kind of goes right, if these guys find their stride, they could be really scary as well.
Now on to a very surprising playoff team from last year. I can't say surprising because you had some guys step up, but the Miami Marlins, I'll just let you go first on this, Scott. I've kind of bogarted this.
No, the Marlins are a good young team, and you talk about it being surprising. Friend of the show, Chelsea Ladd, last year was the first person that we know that really kind of threw the Marlins out there as a potential playoff team, and she was right, and so were a lot of people. They've got a good young pitching staff. Sixto Sanchez, Pablo Lopez, Eliza Hernandez, Sandy Alcantara, Trevor Rogers. That's going to be the strength of this team, is this young pitching. But again, it could also be an issue because, like we said, sometimes young pitching struggles after teams have a look at it. Their offense, there's questions. The middle of their lineup, can Starling Marte stay healthy and be productive all year? And then can Jesus Aguilar and Adam Duvall round back into form of a couple of years ago? If they could.
What is Adam Duvall, though? You said this earlier. What is Adam Duvall? Because he was a strikeout guy before.
But look at the numbers he put up in years in Cincinnati. He was a 30 home run hitter. He was a 100 RBI guy. He was a 4-time All-Star. He had a good year in Atlanta last year. He had 15 home runs and 4. He was a big part of that Braves team last year that went to the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Adam Duvall can be a very big piece to this lineup.
I think so too, Scott. Are we going to do predictions again, or do we just want to go to the AL side?
We can do predictions. I'll let you go first. Tell me
although Scott, can you tell me the order I had? Because dude, I thought I had it written down and I didn't. Because this was a tough division to call to begin with, but how did I have it before?
I was surprised. You went Braves, Nationals, Phillies, Mets, Marlins is how you did it earlier today.
And that fourth place. Yeah, I'm sticking with that, but I'm just saying, Scott, this is going to be a jumbled up division that I don't think the worst team in this division is only going to be 7 games out.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. I went a little farther. I'll give you mine real quick. I went with the Mets. I went Mets, Braves, Nationals, Phillies, Marlins. I was surprised you had the Mets 4th. I just think with that pitching, they're going to be better than you think. But I could be wrong. There could be surprises there. But it is going to be a tough division. I think it's going to be pretty close. I had the Marlins in last place, 13 games out. So, yeah, I had everybody pretty bunched together. So, the NL East will definitely be fun to watch this year for sure.
Yeah, so let's go to the American League East now. And why don't we start with a team that everybody loves to talk about, Scott? Talk about the Baltimore Orioles.
Oh, the Orioles.
Hey, you did it earlier, so I'm just –
I did. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to talk about in Baltimore. It's going to be another rough year for Orioles fans. They do get to go to Camden Yards, which is an amazing ballpark to go to watch a game. I've been there. You can go sit there, watch an amazing game, and then go to the warehouse next door and see where Babe Ruth was born and grew up because he lived in that warehouse building right on the outside of Camden Yards. So that's a really neat experience if you're a baseball fan. But as a team, there's not a whole lot to be excited about. I mean, they've got Trey Mancini, who is a very talented player who wouldn't shock me at all if he got traded at the trade deadline. They've got some young pitching. They've also got some guys that they're hoping for them to find themselves again. Matt Harvey is in the Orioles rotation. So the Orioles hoping the Dark Knight can find that old part of himself again. But I'm not looking for real great things in Baltimore. How about you?
I'm not looking for great things in Baltimore either, but any reason Trey Mancini couldn't be a Cardinal? Just kidding. I'm just kidding. That would be an interesting move, though.
I think Trey Mancini would be one of the guys the Cardinals would look at if they need an outfielder. I think he would be a perfect possibility for the Cardinals because you could look at him being an outfielder this year and then possibly a DH in the future. So yeah, I think that would definitely be a guy that would be on their radar if they have to go out and get an outfielder at the trade deadline.
Yep. So let's go to my AL East division winner prediction from last year, and that's the Toronto Blue Jays. We talk about their offense all the time: Bichette, Biggio, Guerrero, Lourdes Gurriel. You know, they Rowdy Tellez. I keep forgetting about him. This team is going to be good. Teoscar Hernandez, that's another one. This team 1 through 9 is going to be scary. The one problem I have is their pitching, period. Their bullpen is not great. Their starting rotation is not great. When you have Hyun-Jin Ryu starting opening day for you, I think that's a big issue right there.
You talked about the Blue Jays offense, and you didn't even mention the two big free agents they brought in, and George Springer and who else? Marcus Semien.
Oh, yeah, that's right. But I'm talking about the guys who have been there. You know, that's why I brought those guys up. But, yeah, but Scott, I keep forgetting Rowdy Tellez and Teoscar Hernandez. I can't believe I forgot them today.
Yeah, their lineup is stacked. Their lineup is stacked for sure. I'm like you. Is the reason I didn't pick them last year. I don't like their pitching staff. Hyun-Jin Ryu is okay, but he's not really a number one in my mind.
Not at all.
They need Robbie Ray to have a big year this year. They need Steven Matz to do something. They need Tanner Rourke to do something. Nate Pearson needs to be good. And then the bullpen has to be able to step up. And, they went out and got Kirby Yates, and then he got hurt and is done for the year. So there goes that closer they went and got.
There goes the closer they went and got. And that has to hurt, to spend money just to waste it. That's never good. Now, let's go to Central Florida now, and that is the Tampa Bay Rays. The Tampa Bay Rays are a team that have had some subtractions big time. I don't know if I like their lineup right now. Of course, the guy I always like to talk about is Ji-Man Choi, but we haven't seen a big increase from him. Brandon Lau. Their lineup there isn't anybody in their lineup that will absolutely scare you. Yes, they have some nice pieces, but no one that, makes a pitcher prototypically wet himself, if you know what I mean. So
time out. So wait, you're going to talk about the Rays lineup, and you're not going to talk about the guy all October that you threw a fit that wasn't a Cardinal anymore? You're not even going to mention his name?
I forgot about it, but yeah. Randy Arozarena, and we didn't really hear his name in spring training, Scott, and I think that's not a good thing for Rays fans. They want, the guy who was so good all October didn't really have a good spring or didn't play a lot in spring. So I don't know what to expect from a guy in Randy Arozarena, but it may not be good for him. He might have just had his 15 games of fame and that's it, but maybe that's me.
I think he's going to be a decent player. I do. I don't know that he's never going to be the guy you saw in October because nobody can keep that pace up. I think he will be a solid player. I'm not sure that he's a superstar, but I think he can be a solid player. But, that's all the Rays have in their lineup. Like you said, you're looking at Austin Meadows and Brandon Lowe and Manuel Margot and Joey Wendell.
Scott, Austin Meadows was an MVP candidate 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
And last year, you can't count last year.
Well,
you can't count last year. It's 60 games.
But he still didn't have a good 60 games. And, Austin Meadows has had one really good year. You can't really count that as a track record either. So, but I'm just saying, even with that, that's a lot to ask him to try to carry this team. There's just not a whole lot in that offense. And, their pitching staff has been the key to this team, and their pitching staff is not very strong this year.
It's just not. You have a good point there. So this may not be a great year for Tampa, but then again, they could come out of nowhere like they did last year. Let's go to Boston. The Boston Red Sox, they got their manager back in Alex Cora, but they don't necessarily have a direction at this point. I mean, you would think they'd be back to prominence in a year or so, but the Boston Red Sox were a bad team last year. They had some good pieces. I do like some of their offense. Their pitching rotation is absolutely atrocious, and I'm not just throwing guys like Nathan Eovaldi under the bus, because he's the gold in that diamondless pit. Let's just put it that way. They're going to be using him an awful lot, and he hasn't really been the same, Scott, since the World Series back in 2018. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, he had a good stretch, but he's just a solid guy. But you got to remember that the Red Sox have a lot of injuries. I mean, their two best pitchers, Eduardo Rodriguez is hurt, and so is Chris Sale. You put those two guys in that rotation, and that rotation is totally different. So, I mean,
is it better? How much better is it, though?
Well, Chris Sale's one of the best pitchers in baseball when he's healthy.
Okay, what about Rodriguez?
Rodriguez was one of the best young pitchers in baseball. He's one of the most highly touted prospects in the American League as a pitcher. So you're talking about two guys who suddenly – they're all of a sudden 1-2, and then all of a sudden Nathan Eovaldi's now your number 3. So just think about that right there. It tells you how much better they all of a sudden are.
So these guys get healthy, and they're automatically a better team. What about their offense, Scott?
Again, their offense is not that bad. I mean, you've still got Xander Bogaerts, you've still got Rafael Devers. JD Martinez had a down year last year, but he's looked better in spring training. Christian Vasquez is a guy they really like. They brought in Hunter Renfroe, who's got some power. I mean, so the middle of that lineup can score runs. They're going to hit, especially in Fenway. So, I mean, I think their offense is going to be okay. But like we said, because you're missing your top two pitchers, and Sale's not going to be back until probably the end of June or July. So he had Tommy John right at the start. He went down with Tommy John right before the short season last year started. So it's going to be a while before you get him back. So, they're going to struggle, but when they get back, they'll definitely be good. And Wags and I talked about this the other day. If Chris Sale can get back by, say, May or June, a little bit earlier than people think, and he gets 7 or 8 starts by the trade deadline, and the Red Sox are floundering a little bit, but Sale looks good, Chris Sale could be one of the top pitching possibilities out there at the trade deadline, because there's a whole lot of teams that would love to have a guy like Chris Sale in their rotation.
The Cardinals.
I'm going to throw this out there. We've had this conversation, and Mike Claiborne talked about this when he was on our show, Cardinal broadcaster. If the Washington Nationals struggle, don't be surprised. We talked about Jake Odorizzi coming home. Don't be surprised if we get to the All-Star break, if the Nationals are struggling and the Cardinals need a starting pitcher, and they don't start talking about Mr. Scherzer, because would love to see Max back home in St. Louis.
That would be awesome. I would not be mad at that. That's for sure. Now let's go to New York and New York Yankees. This is the far and away best team in this division, but by no means do they not have pitching issues. They have Garrett Cole. You have Luis Severino, who's probably going to be in your bullpen, which is not a bad thing because he has electric stuff, and you want to build him up. Maybe he'll be a starter later in the season. You still have Stanton, you still have Judge, you have DJ LeMahieu back, and that right there is the key to the Yankee offense. It's not Stanton, it's not Judge, it's DJ LeMahieu.
Well, I mean, DJ LeMahieu is good, but they still need Stanton and Judge.
I know, but I mean, it's more than just home runs. And not just saying they're just home run hitters, but you need guys that can get on base, and DJ LeMahieu is that guy.
No, he is. And Aaron Hicks looks like he's completely healthy. That'll be a big thing for them. If it's been a couple of years since he's been completely healthy. They are going to start the season without the American League home run leader. Luke Voigt is injured, so he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. Hopefully Luke to St. Louis gets back soon. And you talked about that Yankees rotation. The Yankees went out and made two big moves. They were kind of under the radar. Jameson Taillon in that 3 spot in their rotation is a really nice move. I really, really like that. And then the guy I think that's going to be a killer in New York, I think Corey Kluber. I know he was hurt last year and didn't do much in Texas, but if there's a healthy Corey Kluber and you can go into a playoff series with those 3 guys, Cole, Kluber, and Taillon, I'll take my chances because Corey Kluber is about as big of a big game pitcher as there is in baseball.
He is, man. I always like Corey Kluber. So, Scott, who do you have winning this division and going forward?
I went Yankees, Blue Jays, Rays, Red Sox, Orioles.
And I'm going with what I had today.
You went Yankees, Blue Jays, Red Sox, Rays, Orioles, did you not?
Yes.
So just the difference there. You think the Red Sox are going to be better than the Rays? I think the Rays take. I think the Rays take a step back, but I think they stay in third. I think Toronto will be fighting for that wild card. I think the wild card in the American League is going to come down to I think the Blue Jays. I think we'll see the Blue Jays, the Twins, and probably the Astros fighting for those wild card spots in the American League. That would be my guess right now.
There are going to be some fun races. That's for sure. Where are we going to go tomorrow, Scout, when it comes to these previews?
What would you like to do? Do you want to do the East or the Central or the West? I'll let you pick.
Do you want to save the Central for last?
We can do the Central on Wednesday. Yeah, we'll get them all in before opening day on Thursday. But, yeah, let's do the West tomorrow.
Let's do the West tomorrow. We'll be previewing the West divisions in the American League and National League tomorrow. Before we go tonight, I was going to take a break, but that kind of went longer than I expected. The St. Louis Blues are struggling into April right now. They've scored 3 goals. What did you say earlier, Scott? 3 goals and 150 shots?
I think it's like that? It's not quite 150. I think it's like I exaggerated, but I think it's like 118 or something. Something crazy that you should have more than 3 goals. But, yeah, their offense just hasn't been going, and Jordan Binnington hasn't played as well as we would like him to. It's been a tough stretch.
Now, Scott, Craig Berube sat Mike Hoffman. Is that going to do anything for Mike Hoffman? Does he really fit this system? I mean, we've seen him long enough, Scott, where we can basically tell this guy fits the system, this guy doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't really look like he does. You know, everybody was excited about Mike Hoffman, but it doesn't seem like he fits with what Craig Berube wants to do, which is a shame, but at least it's just a 1-year deal. At least that's not like a long-term contract you have to worry about if it doesn't work.
You know, some of these guys need to be accountable, and I'm wondering, Scott, if the Blues are going through the same things they've been going through with a bunch of these coaches. Listen to them for a while, but, you know, as we get closer to the quote-unquote crunch time part of the season, no pun intended, they're not listening to Craig Berube. Not all guys are working hard like Berube wants.
No, it's definitely not looking that way. I mean, he's made comments about guys not all pulling in the rope in the same direction and stuff like that. So, you know, hopefully they can get it figured out as you get more and more guys back and healthy, and maybe this team can fix it. And boy, Joe, this hour has absolutely flown tonight.
It has, but Scott, this is an absolute brutal schedule in April. I don't know if you saw it. Before we go, Scott, what is your expectation for this team at this point?
It's going to be rough. It's going to be really, really rough for them to get going just because we haven't seen them get better with guys coming back and getting healthy. So I don't really know what to expect. It's going to be a tough run.
It will be a tough run, that's for sure. Well, thank you guys for watching tonight. It was real fun. Again, tomorrow we'll do the Western Divisions on both the American League and National League. So stick with us there. For Scott Tobin, I'm Joe Hamilton. Thank you guys for watching. Do the right things so we can go back to watch baseball, hockey, etc. So, see you guys.